So with that, let's dig into our afternoon of information. And, you know, one of the traditions that I really admire about this conference that's fascinating and yet so very practical is the stories from the field. And that is their case studies. Every program includes some of these case studies. So to handle that for us this time, we are pleased to have Jerry Emmanuel. Now, Jerry is a poultry feed sales consultant with Cargill Feed and Nutrition. And today he's bringing us a case study that he encountered with one of his clients. And we encourage you to get ready with Slido again, because this session will be interactive and there will be prizes. So with that, I call forward and say hello to Jerry Emmanuel.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Jerry Emmanuel. I've been working with Cargill. It'll be 12 years this upcoming July. And I do have a actual master's of science in poultry barn environment management. So long story short, got to self-feed, but at the same time, I like consulting on farm to deal with any upcoming challenges. In this particular case, there you go. Oh, where's that? Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome. Gonna need that. So this case study was a journey for me personally. Thought it'd be very simple and quick, easy answer to fix the problem. But long story short, took a little bit of time and a lot of learning for me along the way. So the objective of this presentation, just want to state the problem, give a bit of the farm background, information about the farm itself, and the step-by-step plan that took part with this situation that was happening. And then finally conclude with my presentation. And I love audience participation. I have some colleagues in the crowd that know I like to get involved with the audience and ask questions. And yes, there are prizes for the fastest and correct answer. The problem. This producer was finding chicks that rather eat feces instead of drink water. I don't have a pointer on here, but it was disgusting. Like their beaks are covered with poop, just for layman's terms. 3 days after placement, that's when you start finding these chicks. And then by eating the feces, what's happening, they get infected or sick, potentially fall behind, and they never recover. It's really gross to see it. You can actually see them physically eating the poop while their brothers and sisters are there drinking water. So it's just like, wow, why are they doing this? Picture on the right, those birds are about 2 weeks of age, and you can see that they just don't recover at all. They fall behind and just stay behind. Farm background. This was occurring on a farm that was raising antibiotic or without any antibiotics, RWA program. It's been happening the last 3 cycles. He's noticing a trend on the number of poop eaters, I call them, in the barn. I showed up about the 3rd cycle to see if I can address the issue, see if there's something that was missing. This producer raises 52,000 broilers in 3 barns. There's 2 single-story barns and 1 double-decker. The problem was occurring in one of the single-story barns, which is a fairly new barn that was recently built. And in that barn, there's 23,000 broilers housed in it for about 8 days, according to the protocol for the RWA program, where they use a Brutiguard to keep those chicks housed in a confined area so that the cocci vaccine can take effect. As a result of these chicks eating feces, one thing I did notice was that there's a lot of holes in the chick paper, like look like connect the dots, like just holes everywhere. And then the high 1st week mortality was considerably high. Looking at the data here, like, well, that's not high, it's only 1.93%. But if you look at the yellow highlighted section where I make my first initial investigation visit, you can see the trend. It's getting higher and higher with the 1st week mortality. And life of flock was actually increasing too, from 2.5% up to 9.1% by the time he was after 3 cycles. The barn itself, there's 3 heaters on each side of the barn. You can see the feed and water lines, the feed with the line to the circle and the water line just a straight line. Exhaust fans at the back of the barn, circ fans, and then it's a tunnel style system, so there's inlets on either side of the barn. Whoop. So question for the audience, what would you investigate? Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm getting the hang of this technology. As one of my colleagues said, I'm a pretty old guy out in the field. So what should be investigated? Water, enough feed on paper, environment? Nothing. It's just feed and chick issue. So whatever, just they can deal with it. And I'll give you about 15 seconds to give your answer. Top person gets a bucket. All right. Okay, very good, very good. So water. Okay, so the answer is actually environment. I'll go through that. No, no leader. All right, so the answer is environment. Let's do the process of elimination. The reason I say environment, I strongly believe if there's enough oxygen, right temperature, humidity coming in the barn, it creates nice chick activity on feed and water. So I looked at that first, found a couple things, and just made some adjustments. So I looked at the ventilation, made some adjustments to incoming air with the inlets, fan speed. But unfortunately, the same result occurred, and we still had some first week mortality happening on the next cycle, which will be the fourth cycle with this same issues. So now what should we do? Should we double check the water again? Check pH, chlorine levels, bring a vet in, double check the brooding program that this producer does, make sure enough feed on paper, lighting, barn temperature. Nothing. It's a feed and chick issue. We got to talk to the feed company or the hatchery, and they got to smarten up. I'll give you 15 seconds. All righty. Bring in the vet. That's the end. Bring the vet in. Did it say who won that? We'll just have to do a draw at the end. Yeah, okay. All right, so the reason, so double check the brooding program. I know there's enough feed on paper with this producer because he's getting good growth in the first week. Lighting program, we've gone through that together, which was optimal. Temperatures were okay in the barn. Blame feed or chick, come on, like 3 cycles in a row. Hard to blame the hatchery and the feed because we got 2 other barns on the same program, same chicks. There's something else happening that's we got to dig a little deeper. Double check the water and pH. I was happy with that because this producer has to check his chlorine and pH levels since he's on RWA. So yeah, bring in the vet. As I said, pH and chlorine were okay. I was not concerned with the environment. I just worked on it with the producer, so it was more ideal. It was sounding more like a bird health issue to me, and I needed the help of a poultry vet. So brought the vet in. 2 visits were made. One at 2 days of age, and the other 23 days of age. We went through all 3 barns. It's good to make a comparison, seeing 2 healthy flocks versus the flock that's not doing as great in terms of the poop eaters. And this is what the report found. So first week mortality was at 5.2% already. And there's only 2 days of age. So they were really going down. Most of the chicks are against the wall. That's pretty typical though. When you first place chicks, they like to go against the wall if it's bright lights. Just a natural behavior to hide. That's what they're, in my own opinion, that's what they're doing. Chick paper was showing signs of feed disappearance. So they were eating feed good, even though there's only 50% crop fill. On our walk, we pulled out 125 dead birds or chicks, including 4 doing ones. Vent temperatures, 103, 105. 105 is on the higher side, 103, 104 is ideal. Water flow and temperature was appropriate in the barn. Airspeed coming through the inlet, 800 feet per minute. Pretty ideal, not low, it's just right for a barn that's wide, that's about 60 feet wide. The post-mortem findings, the chicks were showing evidence of severe yolk sac infection, and then some coxofemoral head necrosis. Basically, their femur bone, their head on the femur bone is breaking off, and it's really a lot of pain on the chicks, so they just couldn't walk properly. Wasn't a good situation. On the second visit, at 23 days of age, the mortality actually slowed down, went up to from 5.2 to 6.9. So that's a good sign. It's actually getting better. Birds were bright and alert. Lameness wasn't as evident. There were still some dead and poor doing birds though. Litter conditions, nothing wrong with that. Temperature, humidity, ventilation was optimal. Uniformity was going to be affected because you got those birds that are eating the feces. They're staying behind, so now it's throwing off the scale weights because of that, lacking uniformity. So more post-mortem findings by the vet, some flips, 4 birds with flips, osteomyelitis, a bone infection. So eating this poop wasn't doing anything good for them. They're getting bacteria through their blood system. 2 smaller birds, ascites. We find ascites in barns these days. Wasn't an outrageous number. 1 bird with septic arthritis. Did look at the intestinal tract because since it's RWA, there's a chance of a cocci break, but they were pretty clean. The really poor bird had a mild enteritis in the gut there. Question. There's a key observation on one of the reports that the vet made that I actually missed. What do you think it was? Ten more seconds. And the answer is panting. On my initial walks in the barn, I didn't pick up on the panting that the chicks were doing. Vent temps were on the little high side, but it wasn't like all of them are 105 degrees. They're all within that optimal range. Crop fill 50%, nothing, doesn't raise too many alarm bells. I know that feed on paper is being cleaned up, so they're eating well. Airspeed, I just worked on that again with the producer, so we made sure that was optimal coming into the barn. It was a panting. On my first, like I said, on my first walk, I missed that. I didn't see that. Or when our vet came in, they picked up on that, and I was like, that's interesting. Got me really thinking about that. So we know it's like a 36 degrees on the east wall. The east wall is the vertigard wall where the cardboard is. In the middle is about 35 degrees. Further testing, I took my temperature sensor and compared it to what his barn sensor was reading. 2 degree difference. Well, with that 2 degrees, it's telling the heaters to keep heating up. When in reality, it's not as cool. So end of the day, these chicks might be being overheated because the heaters are running a little too often. So after the visit, some recommendations. We were pretty pumped about this. We thought we had this. So we decided to lower the set point in the barn about 2 degrees, so it's more optimal for the chicks to thrive. Increase the airspeed, get some little bit of the excess heat out. Supplement with some vitamin D just to get some leg strength, so minimize the lameness. We were pretty pumped. We thought we had this for sure, and we're couldn't wait to see what the next placement was going to look like. Well, back to square one. It didn't improve. It did improve. Instead of 5.2% in the first week, it was 4.5%. But it was 7.2% at 2 weeks of age, so that it was still a problem. So we had another vet. We had the vet come out again, take a look. Uniformity wasn't as great. A lot of small birds, as expected. They're still eating the poop. There's some twist in neck, so sign of infection, bacteria happening. Temperature, humidity were appropriate in all 3 barns. As we walk through all 3 barns to get a comparison how they're doing. Water and feeder heights were optimal. So environmentally, it sounds like it's a good barn. It's just what is triggering this. Postmortems. This visit was at 15 days of age, 222 grams, 193 grams. These are light birds. These should be about 500 grams at this age. So as I said before, once they start eating the poop, they just fall behind and they don't catch up. All the birds that were looked at by the vet had bone infection. Female had necrosis again was showing up. Some arthritis, yolk sac, just a real mixed bag of problems that they're going through. So after that cycle, had another cycle, a problem with the first week mortality, but it's slowly improving. So okay, maybe we're getting somewhere. So instead of 4.5%, to 4.2. Wow, well, that's something to cheer about because it's still high, like it's really high. Decided to call the poultry tech in just maybe there's something at the hatchery level that they're missing, or maybe this another set of eyes again. So we did our barn walk. Notice the feces on the beak. They're eating poop, some of them. High number of holes pecked in the paper. Just, man, it's just not looking like it's improving at the rate we want it to. But once again, I noticed the panting was happening. And when I noticed was the panting was happening when the heaters turned on. And then I did some more measuring, or we both did, and we noticed that there's a 3-degree difference between the back of the barn and the front of the barn. Got us asking some more questions. What's going on here? What was discovered? The heaters in the barn worked in 3s. As my diagram showed, there's 3 on one side of the wall, there's 3 on the other side. As the sensor calls for heat, 3 will come on, depending which side of the barn that the sensor is calling for, the heat. The back of the barn will get really warm since, remember, it's a tunnel style type of ventilating system. So potentially you're pulling heat from the front to the back. So those birds now that are in the back are getting a little bit warmer than the others. And as the heaters run, well, that's extra heat now being pulled right to the back. The issue, as I mentioned, heat's being generated. The chicks are getting too warm. The panting, our vet saw. And being in a half brooded barn, initially in the first 8 days, they have a limited means of avoiding the heat, the excess heat. Like they can't hide from that. A hot spot, as the term was brought forward to me. So what's happening, some chicks would dehydrate quicker than others. Instead of looking for water, they find the poop, the feces, and start picking at that because it's an easy source of moisture. Gross, sickening, but they get fixed on that and they wouldn't turn back. They just stay on that. They be fixed on it for the rest of the cycle and then stay behind in weight and growth. So this is what it looks like. We got our exhaust fans turning. They're pulling the air's coming in through the sides. 3 heaters going. So that's the central's calling for some heat. Now you got your air being pulled to the back, the exhaust air. to the back of the fan. Well, look at that. Another heater comes on. They don't go in unison. And one set of heaters would come on, then the other set of heaters would come on. Whenever the sensor needed to be more called for heat, that's what would happen. But as you can see, as the heaters are blasting heat, it's pulling that heat to the back. And in the middle section to the back half of the barn, that's where you start seeing that discrepancy in temperature is about 3 degrees higher than at the front. So how do we eliminate that or alleviate that or minimize that issue? I'll give you about 30 seconds. All right, here we go. That's 2-horse race. Excuse me. There is one difference with the answer, and I'll get to that. I'm glad to see some of you think I'm crazy. That's good. So, as you can see, the correct answer is actually just one little technicality, which we'll get to. Oh, we got a winner. Naomi. That is the big question prize I did have for someone. Congrats. Yeah, Jesse. All right. So the answers, you didn't want to turn off the front heaters. You actually want to turn off the back heaters. That's one. By turning off the back heater, just remember my recommendation that we made in my second visit. That was with the first vet visit. We want to lower that set point. So we didn't want to leave the set point to recommendation, we want to have that lower. So that's out. Last time I looked, I wasn't too crazy. My wife might have second thoughts, and I think our poultry tech is pretty good too. I don't think he or she was that crazy either, but you know, some days we'll, you know. The answer is turn the back heaters off, run the circ fans to pull heat from the front to the back, and leave the set point to that lower recommendation that we had mentioned earlier, which I mentioned here. What's happening now, you're getting a more uniform temperature throughout the barn, more comfortable. It's more ideal for the chicks to thrive. So here it is now with the adjustments. So the exhaust fans are running. 2 heaters now instead of 3. The back heaters are off. We still have air being pulled as a tunnel style going to the back. But now we have circ fans to help pull some of that heat from the front to the back. And as the sensor calls for heat, those heaters would turn on, but this was creating a little better situation, ideal environment for the barn. It was a great suggestion by the tech for the circ fans. And we're hoping that we'd see some success after that. We're really hoping. And yes, we did. So in the first three cycles, you can see the first week mortality 5.2, 4.5, 4.2. After the tweaks, after the vets came out, looked at the birds, mentioned the panting, which is a big find, some adjustments with temperature, adjustments with the circ fans and ventilation, 1.9, 2.1, 2.1. That's a win. Now this producer has more birds to sell to the plant, get paid more for more birds. His profitability is going up. So in conclusion, finding these chicks with black beaks, these poopy beaks, it's not uncommon not to find them. They are there. Just how many you find it. If you find quite a few holes in the chick paper, feed on paper, that's a sign of a potential hotspot in the barn that's brewing or happening, and it's creating these birds to look for a quick source of moisture. This challenge did take time to figure out. In this case, over half a year to get to the bottom of what was causing this issue, which we figured out eventually, being a hotspot in the barn. Well, it was important. We only made one change at a time. So it took a little bit of a time, but one at a time, we were able to pinpoint what was the actual problem. And then we went from there. It's human nature to want to this, okay, let's try this, let's try that, try everything. But you're not going to know the answer at the end of the day. So going one at a time really made a difference too. At first, it was just myself and the customer trying to solve the issue. I thought I was going to nail it right away, do some environmental changes, ventilation, and so forth, which wasn't the case. But I knew I had resources in my camp, within my camp, to help with the issue. And making that call for help turned out to be very, very valuable. It was a great team effort, and we had some success. Try not to get discouraged. As a feed rep, as a vet, as a producer, don't give up. It may take some time to solve it. You know what? You might not even solve it, but at least you're trying to alleviate or minimize the issue that you're seeing on your farm. And don't hesitate to reach out for help and ask for help. There's a lot of resources out there. Myself as a feed rep, vet techs, vets, poultry techs for their processing companies, AVGen techs, cob techs, like they're all out there to help you. And if you can't see it right away, another set of eyes can make a difference. I'd like to shout out a huge big thank you to Dr. Gerard and Dr. Maloney for coming out, helping me take a look at things, posting birds, making sure Coxie and other things are under control, but finding out some other things too that really opened up my eyes. Rachel Davidson, Maple Leaf Poultry, sees their tech as well for Maple Leaf. Great suggestion with the circ bands, and the rest is history. And to our customer for being very, very patient and seeing that we really wanted to help them get through this issue. And kudos to him, because he could have just said, I forget it. I'm going to change feed companies or give my 11-week notice to the hatchery. But he saw that we cared and we wanted to solve this with him. So it was a big, big win for everybody involved. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Looks like we have one question. I am just not quite seeing it on mine yet here. Do you want to read? Brenda, oh, here we go. All right. Do you use a thermal camera, and would that have helped in your scenario?
Yes, I do have a thermal camera. I got it from good old Canadian Tire, the FLIR model. It's the best model to use. And it made a world of a difference. It's very accurate. You can see, you can definitely see the difference in temperatures throughout the barn as you do your scan.
Okay, any other questions for Jerry? That was just like a detective, you know, a mystery. You had to kind of work through all the clues, and I'm glad you stuck with it. Okay, we got a couple more now. Do you think of any disease? Did you think of any disease or go for any diagnostic tests on that?
At first, I just thought, as I mentioned, about environment, but just seeing that behavior, I thought disease for sure. And that's not my jurisdiction. I brought the experts in, being Dr. Taryn and Dr. Holland, and see if they can find anything after that. So It was definitely in the back of my mind about disease challenges.
And what about CO2 levels? Did you check the CO2 levels?
I generally don't check the CO2. It's a very vague rule I have. If the humidity levels are adequate in the barn, then I strongly believe that the CO2 levels are okay. If humidity is really high, your CO2 is probably not at a good level to start with there. So yeah.
And then what direction should the circ fans go on the other side?
Question. In this case, we needed the heat to be pulled to the back on one side. Typically, they have a racetrack system where now you can have the fans actually blowing heat towards the front on the other side. Ideally, I've seen it enough times. I suggested to other customers of mine, you put the circ fans in the middle of the barn and you have them blowing opposite towards one another. So one blows that way and the other blows the other way, and you get a more uniform temperature in the barn, and it's proven.
Okay, well, I think we've satisfied some curious minds, and I know I'm sure you had a satisfied producer too after tracking it down to that. And amazing what difference a little thing can make such a big impact. So anyway, let's put our hands together. Thank you very much, Jerry, for sharing that case study with us.